Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our January 2025 Commission on Sustainability meeting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so that apology for that technical difficulty there. But for our agenda this evening, we're going to start with some updates from the office and then go into roll call from the commission. We'll hear a legislative overview from Kristen Harbison at the League of Conservation Voters. And then we'll dive into our topic this month, which is nature in the city, and hear from several experts and some city agency staff on that topic. Updates from the office to start with, our environmental grants will close. The applications will close this Thursday on the 17th, or this Friday, sorry, on the 17th. So please make sure if you're interested, you get your applications in by then. We did host a session for folks that were seeking information about these grants. As a reminder, the grants are available for nonprofit organizations up to $75,000 to support mitigation activities associated with forest conservation, as well as stormwater management in the goals embedded in our critical area program. Some other updates from the office include staff transitions. Our floodplain manager, Jo Birch, is going to be transitioning out of her position. We're very sad to see her go, but very excited for her new opportunity with FEMA Region 3. I'm not sure if Jo is on the call, but if you are, feel free to chime in and say a word. We will be very sad to see her go, but look forward to continuing to work with Jo as she takes on a regional role with supporting FEMA in implementing its floodplain management goals across the entire Region 3. So we will be recruiting for that position in the future. Stay tuned for that. Current employment opportunities in the office include recruitment for the Maryland Climate Corps, as well as the Chesapeake Climate Conservation Corps. These are two programs supported by the Chesapeake Bay Trust, where young people are brought on for 10-month fellowships. And so we have applied to be host sites for both of these programs, and the applications are now open. If anyone knows some young folks interested for the Maryland Climate Corps, that's available to folks that have graduated high school but not yet completed college. And the Chesapeake Climate Conservation Corps is typically for recent college graduates. Other updates, we just wanted to congratulate and let everyone know our Office of Emergency Management, along with the Health Department, was awarded a $20,000 grant to support a heat-focused tabletop exercise. And tabletop exercises help with kind of like disaster preparedness planning for specific disaster events. So this particular one will focus on how the city will respond in the event of a heat-related crisis, where we can have a lot of issues and challenges in working through different scenarios. Some other communications updates. Our 2025 January newsletter will be released soon. We have a lot of updates there in terms of things going on in the office. And we do have all of our 2024 newsletters archived on the website. So anyone that's interested can check out our website for further updates. So I'll pass it back to Mia to talk more about the commission updates and do roll call.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ava. So I think actually Jared is going to do roll call. Wasn't really sure.
Oh, all right. I can take roll call. So we'll just take a roll call. I have Mia Blanc.
Present.
I'm Jared Lyles. I am present. Regina Boyce is not here with the absence. Denzel Brown.
Here, present.
Phil Costa. Right. Gary Crum. Lisa Ferretto.
Present.
Morgan Grove.
Present.
Bill Joyner. Earl Johnson. And I see Phil Costa is actually waiting in the lobby. I'll call him again. Nicolette Lausaint.
Present.
Okay. Inez Robb. As you're here today. I think I see her.
Yeah, I see her name in the list.
I see her name there, but I'm going to move on and just call Phil and Inez again at the end. Brian Smith. We know Stephanie Smith let us know she would not be here today. Ben Zychek.
Present.
Perfect. And Phil Costa. I saw you come in.
Here.
All right, perfect. And Inez Robb. More time. Okay. If you're here, Inez, just put it in the chat or something. And just wanted to remind everyone that we're keeping attendance just in line with the commission's attendance guidelines. So if you can't make it to a commission meeting, just please let us know. All right. I'm going to hand it back over to Mia just to talk about commission recruitment.
Fantastic. You all might have seen some of the social media posts that we are currently recruiting for the commission. Feel free to share this information. There is a link that we will put in chat, but this is what the content looks like if you might have seen it on LinkedIn and other places. So the applications are currently being collected, and we hope to be able to make some decisions early in the beginning of the year. With that, we also have a robust schedule that we have for the remainder of the year that is on the screen right now. So we are right here with People in Nature, and we'll be reaching out to commissioners. We want you to choose a topic that you would like to present on, provide an update or a briefing. That way we can be ensured to have the expertise of our commissioners highlighted. So since we have one other thing, we do have as a follow-up, envisioning our transportation future, which is an event that will take place on Saturday, the 25th. That is that it kind of falls in line with the transportation topic that we had just a little while back. So that is it for me. We're going to actually throw it over, since this is legislative session began last on January 8th. We're going to hear
Mia-
from Chris.
Mia, did you want to talk about the letter?
The letter.
Yes, but I was going to talk about it in between. So
Oh, okay. I apologize.
it's okay. So there's a letter that we are going to send as co-chairs to committee chairs, just kind of identifying the commission and talking about the fact that we do offer expert testimony where it aligns with the various plans. There is an opportunity that we might not have as legislation is fast and furious, and I think we'll be hearing a robust amount of changes that Kristen's going to be talking about in just a few minutes. So more on that in email. So I'm going to throw it over to Kristen.
Great, thank you. It's always nice to see the Baltimore City Sustainability Commission. I'm going to share my screen just to help keep me online, and because it, I think, helps for people to, make sure that I'm sharing the right, there we go. Can you see my screen? Excellent.
Yes.
So again, it's always nice to be, thank you for inviting me to talk to you about legislative session. It is the most wonderful time of the year for those of us who work in the space. So I'm Kristen Harbison. I'm political director for Maryland League of Conservation Voters. I've spoken to you several times before. We are a statewide nonprofit advocacy group that works for environmental bills towards a healthy environment for everyone in Maryland. And we're just going to run through very quickly some of the big issues that will be prioritized by the environmental community this year. And I will say that today was a terribly exciting day because today the budget dropped, the governor's budget dropped. That is the defining issue this year. It is what I keep saying is the monster at the city gates, is the budget and the $3 billion budget deficit that they're trying to balance. So, and we are constitutionally required to pass a balanced budget in Maryland. So there is no alternative but to do that. So somewhere they need to find $3 billion in savings. So good luck to us all. And I think so the governor introduced his bill that will go through to the House and the Senate to work through. So all of that is context behind our legislative agenda this year. And we're all trying to be very cognizant of both the difficult budget year that we're in, making sure that we're keeping as much as possible the fiscal impact to the state low while the benefits to Marylanders high. There's the other, and also we're looking at any opportunities for revenue generation. Because we need, in addition to just the general fund having a deficit, we're also still looking at the $1 billion price tag for the Maryland Climate Reduction Plan and finding the money to help pay for our climate goals. So, with that context, let's see. There we go. So I'll go through just a few of the big issues that are going to be sponsored this year. The Affordable Abundant Clean Energy Bill is one of the big energy bills. There are going to be 100,000 energy bills this session. We're going to be trying to keep track of them all and figure out what they all do, how they work together, where the good are in each of them, what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly, and how we manage to get a good cohesive energy policy out at the end of the session. But one of the big bills that's being introduced this year is the Abundant Affordable Clean Energy Bill, which supports in-state solar generation, more battery storage to help meet those goals, to create reliability within our energy grid. It does support existing nuclear energy. Should Calvert Cliffs become unprofitable, and then there would be a guarantee that it will have the financial resources it needs to get the relicensing, so we can continue to have Calvert Cliff nuclear energy, which currently provides 40% of our energy portfolio. And there's the question of data centers, which has been much in the news. And there's a function of this bill that makes sure that the ratepayers are not paying for the increased energy consumption from the data centers, which are enormous energy sucks. So that's Lord Charkoudian's bill, Senator Ben Brooks. Happy to answer questions as we go, or can take questions at the end. And this is one of the 3 environmental community priorities. The second one is, I think, especially interesting to Baltimore City, is the Cherish Act, which means it's cumulative harms to environmental restoration for improving our shared health, or the Cherish Our Communities Act. This is being sponsored by Senator Clarence Lamb and Delegate Jazz Lewis. And this is a big swing at environmental justice and cumulative impacts. It makes sure that the Department of the Environment is able to use the screening tool that it currently has as one of the things it uses to consider when issuing permits. Right now, they have a screening tool so they can identify the overburdened and underserved communities in the state. They're not allowed to use that information when making permitting decisions. This seems not to make sense to us. Why prevent them from using all the tools and information at their disposal? So this allows them to gives them authority to consider environmental justice in permitting decisions. It does not mean that they cannot issue permits in overburdened and underserved communities. It does mean that if they do issue permits in already overburdened and underserved communities, that there will be meaningful community engagement and community benefits agreements. So this is, as I say, a really big swing at cumulative impacts and environmental justice. It's being led by many of the community groups on the front line and fence line. So we're very excited on this one. This is both a Maryland LCB priority as well as an environmental community priority writ large. The third environmental community priority, which is being led by the Sierra Club, is Senator Ben Brooks and Delegate Jen Terraza, and this is the Maryland Bottle Bill. They've tried this many times before to get a bottle redemption program, a recycling program for bottles, and this creates a 10 to 15 cent refundable bottle deposit on plastic, glass, aluminum beverage containers. It's seen as in addition to being a trash reduction bill, it's also seen as a potential revenue generation. And again, we're all looking for ways that the environment can be a part of the solution to addressing our state budget crisis. We talked about, so the revenue question, we do need to, and I see the question in the chat about Cherish. I'll get back to that question if I can after I run through the rest of the bills. The Coal Cleanup and Asthma Mitigation Fund it does what it says. It's again a revenue generation bill. It's also an environmental justice bill. It says that coal trains coming through the state will have to pay $13 per ton for the coal. This mirrors a similar program that we already have in the state on for oil cleanup, on oil transport. The oil bill is meant to create a fund in case of oil spills. Should there be oil spills, the state has funding to help clean it up. We don't know that there will be oil spills. We absolutely know that as the coal trains travel through the state, there is coal dust pollution. We know absolutely that there is coal dust pollution in the communities surrounding the places where the coals are waiting for export. This provides funding to help those communities address the pollution. 40% of that money will go to overburdened and underserved communities along the coal route. $5 million is targeted for asthma mitigation as an asthma mitigation fund. And this could bring in as much as $300 million per year to go towards climate funds. So it's a revenue generation to help get to support the climate plan, pollution reduction plan. And then the last bill that I wanted to talk about, and then I can go to the question about Cherish. The Transportation Climate Alignment Act, this is once more repealing this passed the House last year. It's sponsored by Delegate Mark Adelson from Baltimore City. And this year is being sponsored by Senator Shelley Heddleman from Baltimore County. It passed the House last year. It passed the Senate committees last year. It got all the way to nearly the getting all the way passed in the Senate, and then it died on sine die. Ran out of time. It was on the calendar. Would have been heard like 10 minutes later had they kept going. They're bringing it back once again. They've looked at it again. They've improved it again, and it requires MDOT to measure greenhouse gas emissions for all major capital transportation projects that are being funded, and then looking at ways requiring offsets for those greenhouse gas emissions into community benefits. So, which could be things like bike, pedestrian infrastructure. It also could include things like solar development along highways, which is flagged as one of the things that could be used. So there are a lot of different ways that the money could be used for mitigation in the communities. And so that's one of the really big transportation bills that's coming back this year. And I'm happy to answer a question about any of these. I mentioned the state budget. We're going to be looking at the state budget. It is the monster at the city gates. We're going to be looking to make sure that while everybody is going to take cuts, we want to make sure that the environmental programs are funded sufficiently to be able to advance our climate and environmental goals and protect the communities that we have. So we're going through the budget books now to see how that did. I think that what the governor has proposed at the moment does do what it needs to do to largely protect environmental programs, and now we're just going to have to make sure that that's the way it passes the General Assembly. And there will be other things going on. There are going to be 100 other issues. We're going to be looking at it, and we're happy to keep posted if anybody has any questions or wants to get involved in any of these things, please keep me posted. This is me. So I just blew through all of these questions, these issues really quickly. I do happy to answer questions. The Environmental Justice Tools is the Maryland Department of Environmental Justice Screening Tool. Yes, that is the tool that they're wanting to be able to use to make permit decisions. And happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kristen. Are there actually any bill numbers that we can?
There are no bill numbers yet. There is one of all the bills I went through. Actually, Transportation Climate Alliance does have bill numbers. I will get those. Actually, I think Transportation Climate Alignment Act has the bill number of HB 84. The Senate bill hasn't dropped. And the only other one that has a bill number so far is the ACE Act, which has a Senate bill number, SB 613. But that's it. There is, as there was last year, a tremendous backlog in bill drafting. So we're waiting. We're waiting for all these bills to drop.
Okay.
But I will absolutely share the bill numbers with you when we get them.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ava? Or actually, I should ask and see if anyone has any questions, but I'm not seeing anything in chat. And I do not see any raised hands. So I think that we're good to move on to Ava.
Great. And Lisa, I'm happy to share the slides. And again, and I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has any questions later or wants to get involved in any of these bills. There's a small sampling of all the bills that will be coming up in the General Assembly. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing that overview with us. We really appreciate having you come and provide that legislative preview every year from the League of Conservation Voters. So next, we're going to share a couple of slides that were shared out through an environmental kind of like legislative overview event that happened last week. I believe this was coordinated by several different environmental nonprofits across the region to kind of do a really detailed listing of all the environmental policies that we know about so far that will be of focus during the legislative session. We're going to drop a link to 2 slide decks that details this information very, very clearly so people can look at that on your own time. But we'll highlight here for you 5 particular bills that we know we'll be looking very closely into in the Office of Sustainability. Just for everyone's awareness, as an office, we have to work every city agency, we have to work with the administration to determine the position that a city will take on any state legislation. So we cannot independently take positions on state legislation during the legislative session, whereas the Commission on Sustainability oftentimes can take a separate position than what the administration has taken. So one of the policy priorities that Mayor Scott listed on his legislative agenda this year was the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act. And that bill has been pre-filed. It does have numbers assigned. It's HB 220 and SB 10, sponsored by Delegate Stewart. This bill has been attempted probably for the past seven years or so in many different iterations, but it removes waste incineration or trash burning essentially from the renewable energy portfolio standard. And so it has a direct impact on the city. It looks like this is the year for this particular bill, especially given that it is sponsored by Bill Ferguson. So if this passes, it will be a huge accomplishment, and we are hoping to see that, and really glad to see that it's also on the mayor's agenda. Another bill that we'll be looking at and providing our analysis on includes the solid waste disposal surcharge bill. So this is a particular bill that provides a surcharge on waste disposal at various facilities, sponsored by Delegate Boyce, who is also one of our commissioners. But this particular bill It takes that surcharge fee that's applied to waste disposal, so it's $2 per ton, and it funds food waste reduction programming with it. It's set across three kind of like priority areas, and that includes a block grant that would go to local governments as well as, I believe, nonprofit organizations. So 50% of the funds would be allocated that way, and then there'll also be two other different funding allocation groups that it will support. The goal is really to support activities that lead to the prevention of food waste, composting, or food rescue or food redistribution activities. If anyone has any questions about that bill, you can reach out to Delegate Boyce or Brenda Platt, who is with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. They've been working really closely with the delegate on that bill. Kristen obviously did a great job in providing that summary of the Maryland bottle bill that again has been attempted for the past few years. And this is really a key one, especially when it comes to the amount of post-consumer waste that ends up as marine waste and waste in our environment that is bottles, and the potential impact that this bill can have. In that link that we'll share in the chat, that provides a more detailed list of the legislation. You can learn more and find out more about this particular bill. Again, these bills that we're listing, we're not saying that the city is or is not supporting them, but it's just something that the office is keeping an eye on. The next bill is the water bottle filling station requirements. I believe this may be the first year this bill has been entered. I could be wrong about that, but we have these particular devices or bottle filling stations in many city buildings. And it's just good policy to transition to this type of reuse approach as opposed to distributing or even using kind of like the water coolers that are still encased in plastic. And so these water filters really help to eliminate post-consumer waste or plastic water bottle or single-use plastic water bottles in our economy. And you can see the benefits transitioning away from, again, those plastic bottles, avoiding any toxins associated with that. And kind of like the mechanism here is applying it to new contracts initiated by the state. And then another bill sponsored by Senator Washington, it's called the Clean Air Quiet Communities Act. Again, this one I believe may be new this year, but we highlight it here because it aligns with the leaf blower bill or the ban on motorized gas-powered lawn devices that was also passed in the city last year. And so it just makes sense to have consistency across the state when it comes to this type of legislation, so that we don't have too much of a patchwork system in terms of one jurisdiction banning leaf blowers or other gas-powered motorized lawn devices and others not. So this in particular has huge implications from an occupational health and safety perspective, particularly when you think of who's exposed to those emissions or that air pollution in terms of the workforce that is using leaf blowers on a day-to-day basis. And it also, as the name suggests, creates that motivation or helps to address noise in the environment, which is one of the chapters in our sustainability plan. We have goals to reduce noise. So that this is really a great bill that we look forward to following, I should say, due to those potential benefits. Now I'll pass it to Mia to facilitate the rest of the agenda.
All right. So that was a whole lot of information that was just shared. And I want to, if you all can stop sharing so that I can actually see our commissioners. I want to see if commissioners have any questions about any of the content that has been shared. When we mentioned a letter just from commissioners, from the co-chairs to our committee chairs, that was just to kind of give a, hey, howdy, we're still here. Here's what we have, we are just stewards of the plan, and we have worked on several plans, and we have experts. We did that because we weren't sure if we would actually have a quorum here today to be able to vote on a legislative agenda as a commission. And we there are only, I think, like maybe 1 or 2 hearings that have been scheduled right now. But we know that this is the best 90 days of the year, and so it's going to move incredibly fast. And we have more commissioners that have not been involved in a legislative season where we're all just kind of looking at either we've done things where we've taken an agenda in advance and we have said what we're going to provide testimony on. And then we have also done things where we have weighed in as legislation has come to us and there's an opportunity to write in. What we have not done all that often is gone to Annapolis and given verbal testimony. The times that we do that has been when it is an Office of Sustainability bill that has been supported by the mayor and is a part of his agenda and is something that is really important to the committee as a whole. For ethics reasons, we cannot, someone is not quite muted, but for ethics reasons, we cannot weigh in individually under the name of the commission. If you want to weigh in on a bill, you will have to just be your own personal self and cannot reference the commission as a whole. So with that being said, I wanted to stop and see if anyone had any questions while both Kristen and Ava are able to kind of explain just a few nuances here. And then we actually have enough commissioners present where we be able to take a vote on what we want to offer as testimony. So I'm going to pause. Hoping that someone will say something. Donzel.
Yeah, as a representative of my organization, I'd be happy to testify in Annapolis for the environmental justice issues that are mentioned, particularly in the early House and Senate bills that Kristen brought up. If I could just schedule time to talk to Kristen directly and get the more information on the legislative agenda and how that's moving through moving through committee and how that might look and how I can be assistance there on my own time representing my organization and what we do, and not, as you mentioned, not the commission itself, but understanding that we have a collective goal here that I would support.
Well, I would, thank you. I put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I will say, so couple things. I'll send out information around the environmental summit that takes place in person on January 28th in Annapolis. And that will be giving more information on the 3 community priorities, which is the Bottle Bill, the Cherish Act, and the ACE Act. So the first 3 bills I mentioned, that will be showcased there. And then also the next several Fridays, Maryland LCV has weekly, what we call Friday digests, which are 30 minutes every Friday from noon to 12:30. You can sign up for those on our website. I'll put that link in the chat as well. Tomorrow we're talking about the budget, and then the next 4 weeks after that, leading up to Maryland LCV's Lobby Day on February 17th. We will be going over each one of getting a deeper dive into each one of our 4 priority bills, which are ACE, Cherish, the coal cleanup bill, and then another one I didn't mention, which is really more shore related, which is the Nearshore Farm and Finance Act. So I'll put all that information in the chat. Love to talk with you. And also there are several ways where you can get more information without talking to me directly, which I'm happy to do. So thank you.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? Lisa, you're unmuted.
Yes, I can't find my virtual hand, but here's my real hand. The February 17th, that's the Maryland League of Conservation Voters Lobby Day, or is that some other day in the 90-day cycle that's important? You're on mute.
Kristen, you're on mute, but it's their lobby day.
Sorry, it is our lobby day, and it's Monday the 17th. We'll be sending more information. We'll be talking about it again. Get on our mailing list. We'll be sending all kinds of information out around that. So, yeah, please be in touch. And I just put the link in to sign up for our Friday digests.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? All right. So hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to submit testimony for the bills that were presented on behalf of the Office of Sustainability.
Mia, is that all of the ones that we heard today or just the ones that Ava presented? Or all the ones that-
Just the ones that Ava presented. And those are, this is actually a pretty generic motion because we do not have bill numbers in some cases. We do not know when there will be a hearing, but we want to be able to kind of have preliminary support knowing that the office finds these bills of interest. And so that way we can move quickly if something happens between our monthly meetings. So
if that happens to me, sorry, I'm also having trouble finding the hand, but so if that happens, so we approve this in general, then if we have to move quickly, we need to quickly draft a letter, then will there be a need to come back to the commission to approve the letter, or is the idea that this kind of gives license to move?
Kind of gives license to move. And so typically what our letters have been is it shows either support or oppose. If there is an amendment that comes from the body or something that we might want to ask people to look at, then we do offer that. So we would be, it'd be a very simple form letter that just kind of talks about what in the past has just talked about what the Sustainability Commission, what's in the plan itself, how we're moving towards the goal, how it aligns, and whether we're in support or opposition, because it aligns with existing plans that we know about.
Thank you. And the reason I ask is just for those who haven't been through this before on the commission, this ends up being the biggest challenge, right? That we need to get a letter out fast, and then we need to get like a majority to sign off. And so I think it's, just speaking from my perspective, it's good to have a general sign off to avoid that bottleneck every time.
Thanks, Kristen. And thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. Lisa, you have another question.
Yes, just a clarification on the Clean Air Quiet Communities Act. Is that just for commercial equipment? I'm thinking about neighborhoods in Baltimore where lots and lots of families just have old gas powered, and is this going to require all of these residential neighborhoods or is it for state agencies mowing lawns at, Baltimore City Community College or something like that?
Did you want to answer that, Mia?
No, you weren't coming through.
Okay, I apologize for that. So in terms of the analysis for this bill, I don't believe the text has been released yet. So I'm not sure the exact scope of it, whether or not it refers to state operations or if it's more general. But as Mia mentioned or alluded to, the vote would be generally to kind of like take a closer look and for the commission to commit to submitting testimony on these bills. We don't know yet what that position will be or whether or not, there would be recommended amendments for that matter. So I don't know enough about the scope of the bill yet to answer your question, but we'll hope to learn more as the text comes out.
Okay, yes, and I'm all in support of continuing to get fossil fuel pollution out of our environment. So I think all four of the bills are fine, from my opinion, to say that we would want to support or provide comment, whatever it might be.
So Lisa, does that mean that you entertain a motion to support
Yes.
the
I second the motion, entertain whatever
I'll
I need
second.
to say. I'll say it.
I'll second the motion.
Jared, okay, so thank you, Lisa, for saying that we as a commission will support the bills that have been proposed by the Office of Sustainability as our initial slate of bills to address for the 2025 legislative season, and it is seconded by Jared. With that, we will actually share the letter that we will be sending to committee chairs so that they know. That will look for that in your email. We will also be sharing the slide deck here that both Kristen provided and Ava provided. If bill numbers do become available, we'll be able to put those in as quickly as possible so that you have that. Donzel, and then Morgan, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask if we had the opportunity to get a briefing on the mayor's legislative agenda, being that we are the mayor's sustainability commission. I don't know if there's actually we can address his agenda and how that would affect the decisions or support that we have.
So since the office is the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, this is the easiest way that we can be as closely aligned to the mayor's agenda as possible, knowing that there have been opportunities where the commission has not been in alignment with the office or the administration based on expert opinion. So, we can put in chat the mayor's agenda. And you can see, I think item number 20 is related to environmental, all the things that might fall under our purview. And I believe that that is something that Ava actually raised in the presentation that you gave, right, Ava? Okay. So
Yes, that is correct.
I wanted to answer all these questions before we actually took the vote that is still on the floor. Morgan, did you have any other questions?
My question was whether or not we were going to be taking a vote. That was okay.
Yeah, I was going to loop back around to that, but I wanted to make sure, because sometimes this body, we will take a vote and still have questions, and I wanted to make sure that we got all the discussion part out of the way, because the rest of the agenda is a really robust agenda, and we have just enough time to cover the rest of the agenda, including your portion. So we are going to do a roll call vote, and Amy is going to keep track of that. So just a reminder, the motion that is on the floor that has been brought forth by Lisa Ferretto and seconded by Jarrett Lyles is that we will have a 2025 legislative agenda of the legislation that has been proposed by the Office of Sustainability and create testimony for those bills. So Amy, we will do the roll call vote now. I will start and I will say I am in favor of that. So yes. Jared?
Yes. Support.
Regina is excused. Donzel?
Yes, in support.
Phil?
Yes, I am in support.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yes.
And then Amy, we just need to add that Amy made the motion. Morgan?
Abstain.
Bill? Just to make sure, I thought I saw Bill might be here. Nicolette?
Yes.
Inez? Inez keeps coming in and out, so someone might need to touch base with her. And then Ben?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. This was my biggest fear, and I'm so glad that we got through this part. Lisa.
I had another question, but I didn't want to ask until we were done with the vote. The other bills, like the Cherish Act and the Clean Cola and Asthma Mitigation Fund Act. Can we also vote that we would support those, or is that under a different process?
What we would like to do is add for the next few months while session is in a legislative agenda time on the committee, on the commission, so that we can have time to get you the bills in advance of the meeting. We'll have a little more time to do that. There might be a hearing coming up. So this is the time to pay attention to emails. And then we will actually hold votes at each commission meeting, February and March. By the time we have our April meeting, session will be over. So we really only have 2 robust meetings, and it's going to just be at the top of the agenda. And hopefully we have to have quorum in order to take a vote. Otherwise, we will not be able to weigh in this legislative session as a body. But we at least have a start of something. So is that helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful, but we don't know anything more about those bills than we do about the ones we just all agreed to. Like, is there any reason why we wouldn't want to just throw in a couple more into the list?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we want to be in alignment. So thank you for asking this question. We want to be in alignment with the Office of Sustainability. Because that's really kind of the first line of support. The other ones aren't necessarily in that space yet. So we want to be able to weigh in on them as a body, and we'll have time to see that. There'll be more information coming each day. Each day is like a week in session. So look for additional information in your inbox so that we know we can talk as a body about nuances that might be needed, positions that we might want to have, all of that. And we might not be able to weigh in on the first, second hearing, but we might be able to have something be a part of the official record so that before something is signed by the governor or passes out of both chambers or makes it to the finish line, we will hopefully have a way to weigh in. And I'm happy to have any conversations with anyone about the legislative process that might have any questions about that. If you have any questions. So at this time, I'd like to hand the agenda over to Morgan, who's going to talk to us about just a quick Climate 101 briefing, people and nature. Morgan is actually he's really humble about being on this commission, but he's written books. He is a professor, and maybe Morgan, you can talk a little bit about your expertise as you're giving this briefing.
Sure, happy to. So I'm going to try to give you a quick, as was said, a 101 of really about thinking about urban ecology, to which it views things historically, the present, and thinking about the future, which would include climate change. What I'm going to talk about is shaped by my experiences and my employment. I work for the USDA Forest Service in research. I'm the team leader for the Baltimore Field Station. I'm also part of something called the Baltimore Ecosystem Study, which is one of 2 urban long-term ecological research projects in the world. And we were started in 1998, what is referred to as the Baltimore Ecosystem Study. The other long-term ecological research project that was started at that time was in central Arizona in Phoenix. I'll also note, so what I'm going to be talking about is sort of that perspective of the development of urban ecology dating from the 1990s into where we are today. The Baltimore Ecosystem Study continues. And I'll also note that Ben, who is humble, heads up a major investment by the Department of Energy. And he leads that with a number of different partners and is doing really fantastic work. And I'll say this now, and I can repeat it later, which is my staff and many of the scientists from the Baltimore Ecosystem Study, and I can't speak for Ben's project, those scientists are always available for providing technical assistance in background, analyzing data, whatever you like. Okay, so with that, In the mid 1990s, starting with the Baltimore ecosystem study, there was a major change in the thinking about urban ecology. And we call this the shift from an ecology in to an ecology of cities, or what we call a shift from a matrix to a mosaic view. And so on the left-hand side is this idea of an ecology in cities. And what the work did was would compare something like a forested area in a park, and no, we're still here, would compare a forested area in a park in a city to a forested area in a more rural area. Or we would compare wetlands using the same approaches, or we would look at a vacant lot and compare it to a recovering system from agriculture. Now, you might think of this in more sort of a practical way. This was the thinking about nature in the city, and that nature only occurred in parks or only occurred along stream valleys, and didn't really think about the fact that nature is everywhere. And in fact, rather than thinking of nature in the city, that we may think of cities in nature. And so reversing it. And that's where we go from this idea of a matrix to a mosaic, or the ecology of cities, and that we have this idea that we are applying ecological thinking. And ecological thinking is really about relationships, studying the relationships of biophysical and social components of cities and how they interact together. And here, with this shift, was we were including much more of the biophysical parts of cities, including the built structures of cities, as well as all the different social aspects of people. And I'll note here that people are not unique in exhibiting social behavior, and that people are part of natural systems. People do not exist outside of ecological systems. They are ecological things. And so this was a major shift in the thinking of urban ecology. Going to the next slide, what we really progressed beyond that, and boy, that is terribly small, was this idea that cities are co-produced by biophysical things as well as social things. And here, for instance, the fact that there's a fall line, which is a geological formation that goes through Baltimore City, was actually critical to why Baltimore became a place in the city, how it was related to hydropower. The fact that the soils have so much clay is why we have so much brick, which is why we have so much row houses, which is also why green infrastructure and doing, trying to have water flow into the soil pretty much won't work because we have so much clay. And so it's this idea that the city is not separate from nature, and in fact, nature helps to shape what Baltimore City is like, or any city is like. And there's this progression in the center in this thinking of an ecology in cities, really focused on ecology and the idea that there was nature in cities, to an ecology of cities and understanding the interaction between ecological and societal things, to an ecology 4, where we're actually thinking purposefully about how we can use urban ecology to make a difference and to engage people. And finally, to an ecology with cities. We like these kind of conceptual progressions, and that we should do justice-inspired research, that we should try to do things that promote equity, inclusion, and making cities a better place. The inclusion also includes who is involved in thinking through science, and that communities are involved, government agencies are involved, the private sector is involved in doing this. Going to the next slide. By the way, you're getting a semester's worth of urban ecology from Yale in 10 minutes. So thinking about where we actually are in our progression in urban ecology, we have this diagram which focuses on the idea of regenerative urban ecology and regenerative cultures. And on one axis is what we call degenerative cultures, meaning that the place is getting worse than it had been previously. To sustainability in the center, which is essentially saying we're just treading water, we're staying where we are. To this idea of regenerative ecologies or regenerative cultures, which is where personally I think that we need to try to move, which is we leave Baltimore a better place than we found it, a better place that is more better prepared for the future and for climate change and societal change, all sorts of things. And when that's done, it means that we're thinking more like nature and how ecological systems work, and we're thinking with nature. Additionally, and what you have at the center there is this idea that we have a number of sustainable development goals, and all of those need to be included as we try to advance how cities work. We go to the next slide. In doing so, it is this idea that we have complicated and complex problems. And in both complicated and complex problems, a system, and they're both kinds of systems, and that in both cases, a complicated system can have a huge number of parts. Like a spaceship has a huge number of parts, but the interactions among those parts are predictable. And in general, there are no feedbacks within that system. In contrast, ecological systems are complex systems. There are lots of feedbacks, and the interactions among the parts are not predictable, and there may be what we call emergent properties that come out. When cities first were being studied, they were treated as complicated systems, that all the interactions among the parts were highly predictable. And the way that they were organized to be managed was as though, for instance, you have lots of departments. They all take their little pieces to it. They're all siloed, and that's okay because all the interactions are supposed to be predictable, and it'll work. What we've learned is not only that cities are complex, not complicated, but they also exist within complex systems, within the larger regional and global scales. And that would suggest that we need to reorganize how we manage cities. That the idea here is that we need teams of teams, which was actually first developed by the US military, in thinking about how to engage and work in complex systems. And so it's not just how we study cities, but also how we organize and manage cities. Going to the next slide. Another important insight has been that history matters. And so, for instance, here, a lot of our work is focused on environmental justice. And we see that when we map out and compare blue line neighborhoods, green line neighborhoods, yellow line neighborhoods, and red line neighborhoods in the city of Baltimore, that green line neighborhoods have twice as much canopy cover today than red line neighborhoods. So decisions that were made in 1935, and really that was a point in time, is still apparent in where we have trees and where we don't have trees in the city. And why I said it's a point in time, because what one starts to realize, in particular as it relates to studying cities, is that institutionalized racism is really the only resilient system that we have in the United States. It has persisted for hundreds of years, and it has adapted for hundreds of years. And so if we want to build resilient systems, we actually need to understand the only resilient system that we have in the United States, so that we can learn and build positive forms of resilient systems. And if you want to kill this one, you've got to tackle it as though it's a resilient, highly adaptive system. So what we understand is not only that we have to understand the complexity of cities, that we need to understand that nature is everywhere and that we are part of it. It is to understand that time and legacies matter, and that we have resilient systems that are incredibly difficult to change and has been highly adaptive for hundreds of years, and that we have to reorganize in how we approach these things. And as a person who's been around before there was an Office of Sustainability, it's very heartening that there is an Office of Sustainability. Finally, that we have written about these things. And Maya's mentioned that we've written a couple books, and both of these things are out of print, so there's no shameless plugging here. But if we go to the next slide, is to really make the case that there's been a lot written. There's a lot of science available for Baltimore about urban ecology that actually is available nowhere else in the world. And so we have one book called the Baltimore School of Urban Ecology, which is about the ideas about how do we think about cities. And then we have another book, which is empirical in nature, which tries to summarize many of the insights that we've had over the past 25 years. And I'll stop right there. Hope that was helpful.
So if the books are out of print, is there a way to get a copy that we can have signed or something?
Well, I have plenty. So apparently apparently during COVID, everyone stopped reading books. And so the Science for the Sustainable City, I have lots of extra copies in my office that we bought for $2 a piece before they recycled them. And I have digital versions of the Baltimore School of Urban Ecology, and I'm happy to share that with everyone.
Oh my goodness, that would be really awesome to see. Are you taking questions about what you shared?
Sure, I'm
Besides-
happy. Yeah, happy to.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions, commissioners? Thank you very much.
Sure.
That was really insightful. I have a couple of questions in the weeds actually about just housing and green space, et cetera. I know, for instance, this is a park. It's not necessarily a park. It's separate, but it's an urban. Baltimore is famous for having a lot of urban forestries. What impact do you think that has? Because I know that they're not concentrated in all areas of the city, and in a large part, they're separate from residential neighborhoods. So
our research has shown that the large parks have less of an effect on cooling the city than lots of small parks. So you could have a big park, think of that as a huge refrigerator or air conditioner, or you could have lots of little mini splits distributed. And that the research has shown that the smaller forest areas have treed areas have a much bigger impact upon improving or reducing heat than the large parks. So you think of Druid Hill Park and Leakin Park, they have less effect than the smaller areas. And I should note here that Ben's team is doing a phenomenal job of doing a lot of the work on heat now today. The other thing is also that, our research has shown that the canopy cover in where we have trees reduces gun violence, and it reduces gun violence and promotes safety to the extent that for every 10% increase in canopy cover, you have a reduction in 11% in crime. And I could go, that's a whole nother hour-long discussion for why that might exist, but that's something that we found.
thanks, Ben. Morgan. I think Ben did raise his hand.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add on, and thanks, Morgan. I always love hearing you talking about this. And I want to point out that, thanks to the work that Morgan's and his team have done over the years in the Baltimore Ecosystem Study, I'm not sure everyone this makes it all the time.
And I think we lost you.
While we're waiting for Ben to come back, one thing I'll note too is that Johns Hopkins School of Public Health received internal funding, and one of the things they're looking at is in their city agencies and NGOs involved is looking at how greening vacant lots has an effect upon juvenile health. So young adults, which are studying young adults is very difficult because of the appropriate protections for interviewing people under the age of 18. But that there's a lot of ongoing research on that topic as well. And it's physical health as well as mental health that is going on in terms of green. And that's called Project Vital, that is at the Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I think Ben might have come back.
Okay.
So he's in, but is muted.
Well, while he's going, the other thing to note is that we study terrestrial and aquatic systems, and the Gwynns Falls watershed, which is on the west side, is the most heavily instrumented long-term watershed study, urban watershed study in the world. And there's been a lot learning from that in terms of how urban watersheds work.
And Gwynns Falls about to become a state park. Is that what I'm hearing?
A partnership park, I think, was the language.
All right. Thank you for this. I think we might have to have a part 2 because there's a lot of there's a lot of great content that you've shared. I'm actually going to hand it over to Amy to go with the rest of our agenda that we have. Thank you, Morgan, for sharing this. And Ben, if you can put your question in chat, that would be fantastic. And Inez, if you can let us know if you were able to hear the vote earlier to vote, that would be great if you could type in your answer. Amy, I'll hand it to you.
Sure. So the way that the topic connects to the sustainability plan and the climate action plan, this is a very, very clear connection with a section of the sustainability plan called Nature in the City and a specific people and nature topic. But really, all of the topics under Nature in the City relate to people and nature in some way. And some of the other topics in the plan related to environmental literacy and neighbors and neighborhoods also relate to people and nature. And as far as like themes, when you look at the different actions and how they relate to people and nature, the different sections of the plan have actions related to improving access to these resources, how we steward them, how we make them beneficial parts of neighborhoods, how we work with communities as far as improving understanding of different resources and creating programming that engages people with nature. Next slide. And then with the Climate Action Plan, the plan focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and as part of that process, there was a strong voice from a number of people that we should not just focus on the emissions sectors as far as buildings, electricity, transportation, and waste, but also include a section of recommendations on nature-based solutions and how those types of actions can also contribute to climate action. And now I'll hand it off to Natalie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. I'm excited to be here with you. I hope you're making it through this super cold day. I'm Natalie Cohen. I'm the Reimagine Middle Branch Resiliency Manager with the Office of Sustainability. And I'm going to share some great updates and progress that we've made in the past couple years. I'm starting my timer just to make sure I don't yap my time away. Okay, next slide, please. So for those, I'm sure most of you are aware and familiar, but Reimagine Middle Branch is a comprehensive plan and vision to reconnect South Baltimore communities to the Middle Branch of the Patapsco. Next slide. And just zooming out real quick, we have our beloved Inner Harbor, of course, to the north, and the Middle Branch is the southern portion of the Patapsco River. You have the Patapsco flowing in from the west and drains. The mouth is bisecting Cherry Hill to the north and Brooklyn to the south. And we also have the Gwynns Falls emptying right next to the incinerator there, where we have a trash wheel. So we have the iconic and beloved Inner Harbor, and then we have oftentimes forgotten and neglected shores of the Middle Branch. And we're really trying to make it the next big waterfront, both for people and for all the ecological benefit as well. We can go to the next slide. And I just wanted to uplift this quote from Dr. Frank Lance. He's the CEO of Parks and People Foundation. He said, "This is not a capital project with environmental justice elements, but rather an environmental justice project with capital elements." Next slide. And really centering this project and this program around equity and access, we have 4 main frameworks that are all based in equity that are really driving the plan forward. And so I'm going to run through these 4 frameworks and really trying to emphasize the city, nature in the city, and staying on theme here. So we can go to the next one. So our first, and probably the framework that we've made the most progress on, is the protect and restore the shoreline. So historically, the Middle Branch had really nice sloping gradual shores, lots of wetland and marsh grasses, and really a lot of biodiversity, and it has become hardened over years due to infrastructure and industry and development. We can go to the next slide. So we have, this is the water side of Reimagine Middle Branch. We're calling it the Middle Branch Resiliency Initiative, and it's it's the largest coastal resilience initiative in the state. We're setting out to restore over 50 acres of habitat along the 11 miles of shoreline that is the Middle Branch, and bits of the Gwynns Falls and the Patapsco as well. We are very much underway. We actually broke ground on our first wetland restoration project, the Hanover Street Wetlands, this summer. We have successfully fundraised $67 million, and I think South Baltimore Gateway Partnership probably has another 100+ million pending grant proposals in the ether. We can move on to the next slide. So as it currently stands, we have 5 wetland projects in mind. The Hanover Street Wetlands down here towards the south of this photo, that is our first to break ground or break water. And then the MedStar Harbor Hospital, we are nearing permits, right, Grace? I hope so. And that should be breaking ground sometime in 2025 as well. And then we have really cool happenings over here in Smith Cove, doing some stormwater wetlands, and the Patapsco Delta East, and BG&E, the Spring Garden campus. We can go to the next slide. So there's many reasons we're embarking on this, very ambitious goal of restoring and creating living shorelines. And one of them is to build climate resilience. There's a lot of critical infrastructure in South Baltimore. Oops. Did Ava drop off?
Nope, I'm still here. I'm just readjusting the slides to give it a better presentation. I think it was kind of small for a lot of folks. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Keep talking. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. But so those maps, so we have really significant infrastructure in South Baltimore. And I was going to highlight 2 of them. One is the MedStar Harbor Hospital, which is a huge asset to South Baltimore. It receives patients from Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, and the city, of course. And Hanover and Potee Street is, anytime there's a severe storm event, it's terribly flooded. If we can just go back a slide. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so we have Harbor Hospital is towards the south of that red box. And then we have the BG&E Spring Garden Campus, which is those big containers with the horses painted on them by the 395 spaghetti interchange. And that is housing like millions, if not billions of dollars of infrastructure around natural gas. And so they are both in the floodplain and they're both very prone to flooding. So we're looking at building climate resilience through these wetland restoration projects. And that's a major component there. Most of my slides are just photos to really illustrate it. So I'm gonna just pause for a second. But yeah, so I think while we wait for those slides, here we go. Let's see. I know WebEx loves to keep us on our toes, right?
My laptop is having a fit right now, so I am trying to get to that slide. But we may have to have a team member.
I mean, I can share my screen if I'm able to. I have the presentation up here. But just that we're really looking at building climate resilience, but then in addition to that, access to nature and to the shoreline. So we're looking at creating really great boardwalks and trail systems that are, for pedestrians and biking, that would take you along the entire shoreline and really get you down into the wetland restoration areas. And the next, let's see here. We're also working on transforming barriers into connections. So that's the second pillar or framework rather, that is all about access. So due to industry, due to development, South Baltimore neighborhoods have become fragmented and disconnected from themselves, but also from the waterfront. So we're looking at ways to really build connectivity and make sure that folks that have lived in South Baltimore have access to the shoreline as we're, making all these great enhancements to it. There's also, I'm sure folks are familiar with the Masonville Cove. It's the first U.S. it's the first urban refuge by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And it is an absolute anomaly to that South Baltimore super industrial part of town. And it's incredible. They have, I believe like the only documented nesting eagles there. There's birders love to, okay, perfect. I see we're here. Nice. Okay. We can go back to like that map of the flooding. Yep. Okay, great. So you can see here we have the hurricane inundation, nuisance flooding, and flood exposure. And the MedStar Harbor Hospital is in that red box to the south. The BG&E Spring Garden Campus is to the north in that other red box. And they are both very vulnerable to flooding. During heavy storm events, the Hanover Street Bridge is practically impassable, so folks can't get to the hospital. And then the natural gas is responsible for powering a majority of our city's infrastructure. And so those are both very critical pieces of infrastructure. We can go to the next slide. So this is just a rendering. The Hanover Street Wetlands is the project that we've broken ground on. We can go to the next slide. I've got some pictures. And Ava, if it would be best for me to share, I can. But I think we got it now. Here's a picture of the shoreline. This is like right along where the Hanover Street bridge is. Crazy erosion. What is not eroded has become dominated by Phragmites. So you can go to that next slide. It's a very invasive marsh grass that has completely just formed a monoculture over the remaining wetlands. Next slide. Here's an aerial shot of what we have. I believe this was in the spring. This is all Phragmites. We can go to the next slide. This is a rendering. So I'm not an engineer, but you can see we're bumping out and we're making these little tidal pools for all types of critters. Next slide. And here's a photo from when construction just began. So you can see we're going to be taking it out pretty much to like where that yellow boom is. And this is funded partially by DPW and the stormwater bill or funding pot of money. I'm not sure Kim is on. I think you can put that into the chat. But they are, so the city is partially funding this project. Next slide. So I was talking about the barriers and forming, turning those barriers into connections. You can go next. This is just a map to show, to really illustrate how fragmented it is, both from the shoreline and from one another. Cherry Hill, for instance, is bound by water on 3 sides, and CSX freight rail to the west. So just really showing how important it is to think about accessibility and connectivity. Next slide. So this is what I was getting at earlier. We would be absolutely missing out on a wonderful opportunity to get folks down on the water that have been historically deprived of this waterfront access. And so we have a boardwalk and walking and running trail, and the shoreline edge and a tidal creek flowing. And so it's really, we're putting the people into nature as well as bringing nature back to the land. Next slide. Masonville Cove. So that's that beautiful parcel of land down here in practically Brooklyn, Curtis Bay area. The Masonville Cove connector. So right now there isn't a way for multimodal transportation or pedestrians to get to Masonville Cove safely. There's no sidewalks, there's no wayfinding. And so we have, a neighborhood that is next to this incredible asset, but they don't have a way to safely access it. So the port and I believe Greater Baybrook are leading the charge on the Masonville Cove connector, and it's all about getting folks, providing and extending trail access to get to Masonville Cove. We can go to the next. And just wanted to plug that we have the Cherry route. So now the Charm City Circulator is going down to Cherry Hill, which is really exciting because for a while there wasn't a free running short on time. Yes. Okay. Next slide. And we can go to the next slide. So these are some assets that we already have in the Middle Branch. So the Baltimore Community Rowing and the BCRP's Water Resource Center is such an asset. And so fun fact, in that bottom right photo, me and Rachel in our office, we did a Learn to Row class. So that's her in the front, and then I'm third in. And if you haven't done a learn to row session, I highly recommend it. It's really fun and a really cool way to experience the Middle Branch and get out on the water. Next slide. Oh, and they also have a really fantastic junior rowing club, and there's been really great success of getting South Baltimore students scholarships to like fancy Ivy Leagues that do crew. So it's just a really great way to get kids exposed to new experiences and potentially onto a university. We have culturally relevant programming like Splash, which was took place this summer in the park and got people on the water and fishing. Next slide. And these are some renderings of the future Middle Branch Park, where we have visions for a new boathouse, this like sandy beach where you can actually like walk your kayak or canoe into the water, some observation decks. Next slide. Some more photos as well. Middle Branch has one of the best views of the city skyline, so we're hoping to leverage that. But also knowing that there's lots of neighborhoods that need access to green space in their backyard. So we're also reaching into neighborhoods and leading capital projects like the Solo Gibbs Park and Florence Cummings in Westport. Next slide. Next slide. So this is like the newest update. There's a major new park and development coming to Westport, working with Westport CDC and the mayor's office and the developer and BCRP and South Baltimore Gateway. We're going to be creating a new waterfront park. So you can see this thin parcel of land between the buildings that is going to be deeded over to BCRP, and it'll be accessible to the public. This is what Westport looks like today. No, Ava, that's great. You can go to the next slide. So folks in Westport, they can look out their window, they can see the water, but they legitimately cannot get to the shoreline. They have to cross over light rail. They have to cross over a city street. They have the freight rail there. And then this to the right is the old glass factory, and it's a brown field and it's fenced off. So you literally can't get to the water. But with this new Westport project, we're gonna go to the next slide. And then we can just zoom through because it's just photos. So this is like going to be a promenade leading you to the water, nature play space, cool stormwater, wetlands at Smith Cove that I would love to talk more about another time. And then mark your calendars. There's going to be a pop-up ice skating rink on February 8th at Middle Branch Park. So bring your family and friends, and I think there'll be pony rides too. And that's my contact info. Sorry for running over and the technical difficulties.
No
but
worries.
I'm happy to answer any questions offline. I'll put my email in the chat.
Ton of great information. Sorry, we had to rush it through the tail end of that, but great info. I can't wait to get to that skating rink.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again. And yeah, your contact info is there. We'll share the presentation. If we can share any questions offline later. I want to introduce our next speaker. We're going to have Ebony Smith talk about connecting children with nature from our very own Office of Sustainability. She is the Community and Youth Engagement Coordinator at the office. You here?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ebony Smith. Thank you for that introduction, Jared. Yes, I will be presenting on the Baltimore Connecting Children to Nature initiative. To start off, I'd like to give a little bit of clarity about what the Children in Nature Network is, which is what the city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative falls under. So the city's Connecting Children to Nature is an initiative that supports cities as they work to change and improve citywide systems so that all children have opportunities to play, learn, and grow with nature in their daily lives. It's really a matter of focusing on equity when it comes to green spaces and access to those green spaces. So as of right now, there are 51 cities that are a part of this initiative, and Baltimore is one of them. You can go to the next slide. Back in May in 2024, we attended a Vision Lab to help us begin our strategic planning process. And we are going to continue that process as we move forward to further refine our actions. And we'll talk about that more later in the presentation. But from the Vision Lab, we learned of other cities' successful projects, such as other cities like Rochester's uplifting their Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, as well as experiencing Madison, Wisconsin's Nature Everywhere Day. And these projects have helped shape future projects that we will talk about later. In addition, we initiated collaboration with technical assistants. So we actually have 2 technical assistants from the Children in Nature Network that support us along our way to help us either find funding or to help us with other aspects of our projects. We also gained access to resources. So we have been working on a community assessment workbook to kind of identify where we are and how to move forward appropriately. We actually finalized our vision statement and mission statement. So we will talk about that more in the presentation as we move on. And in addition, we received information regarding network strategies, which I will also follow up on later in the presentation. We can go to the next slide. So the first strategy that we learned about was Nature Smart Libraries. So this strategy focuses on using public libraries as venues to connect children and families to nature. The main people engaged in these strategies involve library patrons. So for instance, the Enoch Pratt Free Library, or park visitors as well. So we could also engage people a part of BCRP and its constituents. The overall benefits for the Nature Smart Libraries includes reaching families of color and low-income families through a known neighborhood source, maximizing library facilities and resources through partnerships with parks departments, increasing regular access to nature for children, young adults, and families, and lastly, strengthening stewardship and expansion of library green spaces in adjacent parks and gardens. Next slide, please. Another strategy that we have is the Green Schoolyards program, where we actually collaborate with the Baltimore City Schools to make sure that schools have access to green spaces in their on their campus. So as you can see here, there was a case study from the Children in Nature Network on Baltimore's Green Schools Initiative, because Baltimore City Schools has a sustainability plan, which also supports some of our initiatives under our sustainability plan, such as, and some of the goals under that plan involves developing environmentally literate students, creating healthy school environments, reducing and conserving natural resources, improving school green spaces, engaging school communities, and building student leadership. And we also do that. We support us in our office support this initiative through funding awards through the Green Healthy Smart Challenge, which is an opportunity for teachers and green teams at local schools to receive up to $2,500 to support their projects, which could relate to green schoolyards or vegetable gardens or creating outdoor play spaces or or maybe it's composting or recycling. There's a bunch of different projects that students lead and gain funding support from through our Green Healthy Smart Challenge, which is also going underway right now. You can go to the next slide, please. Another strategy involves youth leadership development. So this focuses on training Nature Smart youth leaders. Us in the Office of Sustainability, we support this strategy through our Youth Sustainability Leadership Internship Program, where we have currently 2 interns, but we're hoping to expand it to up to 14 interns soon. The interns will be able, currently they're doing different projects such as creating infographics or creating presentations or learning the craft of storytelling to help promote different stories related to environmental justice, but also to help us share out the project's success from the Green Healthy Smart Challenge. And in addition, they receive knowledge from different presentations from outside partners that are experts on different matters related to environmental sustainability. So in the past, we've focused on food sustainability. They've also focused on environmental legislation as well as environmental justice. So these are some topics that they're getting trained in as part of their internship program. Next slide, please. I think the last strategy is early childhood connection, which focuses on getting youth that are probably under the age of 5 to, yes, from, as you can see in the image, 0 to 5. I can't point to it, but early childhood ranges from 0 to 5. And it's just to make sure that youth at that age gain access to nature and all of the benefits that it has. Next slide, please. We currently have many members on the Baltimore Connecting Children to Nature initiative. We have the Office of Sustainability leading it. We also have the National Aquarium, the Baltimore Greater Wilderness Coalition, Indigo, or Inward Discovery Rose Outdoors. We have BCRP, Temple X Schools, as well as city schools. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our vision statement redrafting this past year. Our current vision statement says, we envision a Baltimore where every child is safe, inspired, and empowered to explore opportunities for learning and healing in the outdoors, cultivating a deep connection with nature. In this city, nature is accessible to all with diverse and inclusive green spaces that nurture curiosity, foster ecological identities, and encourage environmental stewardship. So again, we're honing in on the aspect of making people leaders, especially youth. Our mission statement states that Baltimore Connecting Children to Nature aims to synergize and elevate citywide efforts among governmental and non-governmental entities to engage youth in nature by various goals, including increasing access to nature, supporting opportunities for children to connect with nature, potentially through like programming or other opportunities, fostering an environment for collaboration between environments, which we do through our coalition, and a number of other goals that you can see listed here. So why do we focus on nature and access to nature? We focus on it because it helps to increase the health of children. It helps to improve eyesight. I'm sorry that these images are so small. I will have to work on the quality of them in the future. But it helps with eyesight and vitamin D levels. And it helps to increase physical activity and social emotional well-being was the one mentioned earlier. The decrease of violence with access to nature. So it does have a toll that it takes on you socially and emotionally. Next slide, please. A positive toll. In addition, there's a better academic performance, enhanced attention, especially in the classrooms, increased engagement and enthusiasm, and overall improved behavior. So these are some ways or benefits of connecting children to nature that we focus on when we're moving forward with our initiatives. So I mentioned the Green Healthy Smart Challenge. I believe we have out of 160 schools, we have, I believe, engaged 130-ish schools. I could be wrong, so please follow up with me if you have questions about that. But since the foundation of the Green Healthy Smart Challenge, I believe we've reached 130 schools. But I'm not 100% certain, so please follow up if you have questions. We typically disperse around $50,000 per year to about 30 or so schools. This year we have reached 34 schools that are receiving funding. Next slide, please. I mentioned the Youth Sustainability Leadership Internship Program. If you know any high school students that are interested in being a part of the program, please reach out to me, and I'd be happy to share information with them so they can learn how to apply. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention one of our initiatives is in support of Indigo's upcoming Nature Everywhere Week. I'd be also happy to share more information about that if you have questions. My contact information is at the last slide, so please feel free to move forward. Yeah, we can skip this slide.
And we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentation as well, so folks can follow up and get your contact info. Oh, I think you went on mute just then, though.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Once again. Sorry, we are moving quickly through these presentations. A lot of good information, but if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up and check the presentations afterwards. And then last but not least, we're going to have Danielle Bilat, I hope I got that right, from the greening coordinator of the Department of Planning, come and talk about biodiversity and pollinators in municipal policy. Danielle.
Thank you. And thank you to the commission for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to try and go through things pretty quickly. I have a lot of slides, but they're like majority pictures. And I got a nice little glow about me right now with the light I have above me. So while I'm sharing my screen, let me enlarge this first. I am Danielle Bilat. I am the greening coordinator for the Department of Planning, and I have somewhere between 12 and 15 years experience in landscape architecture, ecosystem services and planning, as well as biodiversity and pollinator habitat. So I've contributed to the White House Pollinator Action Plan under Obama, co-written some lead points with USGBC. I was also an associate teaching professor at the University of Colorado Boulder previous to this position. And so I'm really excited to be working here in the Department of Planning to make some progress on any biodiversity initiatives that we can as a city. There we go. All good? Great. So, luckily, Morgan covered the first couple slides. So we often think, this whole presentation and day-to-day is about nature in the cities. And we often think of nature in cities in terms of larger areas, parks, forests, preserves, and other items. But our city is really broken up into these mosaic pieces. And we can't really attach our brush stroke or our paint strokes with ecological initiatives as easily in a city. But there are significant ways that we can look at the edge effects in our cities and how we can look to maybe amend some city requirements for, say, parking lots or other development types with multifamily, anything that has planting requirements attached to it. That is an opportunity for biodiversity, especially when considering insects and pollinators with them, because they can deal with habitat fragmentation really well. And each piece thoroughly matters in these initiatives. So I'm going to go through some pretty pictures of native bees. What are they? Just to get everyone on the same page, and why parking lots and other smaller pieces of urban green spaces are incredibly effective for both habitat and foraging for insects and pollinators. Some before and after images of pilot test cases that I've run to show that my street cred and that they do work and how they could look in the end. And some calls to action or just ideas on ways that we can look at different City of Baltimore policy integration with these principles. So we have actually over 3,600 bee species in this country at a minimum. It's probably closer to double that. And in the world, at least 20,000, probably closer to double that as well. And so when we think about bees, we often think about honeybees. But honeybees are actually only 4 to 7% or 4 to 7 species out of that 3,600 species in the country. And honeybees are not native to the US. They were brought over from Europe. And so our native bees are designed to pollinate plants that have been here throughout time and crops. They are designed for that. Non-native bees, such as honeybees, aren't as well suited for pollination of a lot of different plants and crops, and sometimes can't even do them. And so these are just some pictures of, is this showing up a little grainy on your end?
It's
Okay.
nice and clear for me.
It looks
Okay,
good.
awesome. Okay,
No, it's
awesome.
fine.
Sorry, it's showing up grainy on my end. I have no idea why, so I'll just keep going. All right, so these are some pictures of native bees, and they are as diverse as the plants and crops that they pollinate. And they come in all different sizes and shapes and textures. And what's really important with them too is they range in terms of specialists to generalists. So some of them only pollinate very specific plants, and some of them will pollinate kind of anything. You know, mason bees are a little bit more ubiquitous versus southeastern blueberry bee. Like that's a very specific native bee that's like, you know, this is my crop, this is my plant, this is what I prefer to go and forage off of. And so it's kind of highlighting the importance of biodiversity and how the principle of diversity supports diversity. And why native bees? Cost, we don't pay for them. If we build it, they will come. So if we provide some bare ground and softwood, they will come and nest in there, as long as we also provide some food for them. And so the cost for them, you know, costs for honeybee hives are, for agricultural rental, are like $250 to $300 easily. And they result in at least $250 million in pollination services alone in our agricultural fields. So it's really, really costly. And that's not how we need to think about them in cities, right? Like, we want to make sure that these bees have the ability to move throughout our cities. And they are also more efficient in pollination. Native bees are suited to our native landscapes and also adaptive plants as well. And native bees, roughly on average for the country, operate at about a 92% efficiency rate, whereas 91% efficiency rate, whereas honeybees operate at more like a 72% efficiency in pollination. And the big key for native bees and the big win is that they are very much so more safe to encourage into our urban landscapes. 90+% of native bees actually don't sting. They don't really care about us. Some of them can't even sting. And so they are safer to encourage in our landscapes. And these are just some of the examples from our urban farms and our community gardens that these are native bee crops. Some of these can only be pollinated by native bees. Some of these, you know, if they're pollinated by honeybees, we're talking like 10 to 20% efficiency. So our production would go way down. And so why parking lots? Overarching principle. Bees need to be able to see or smell their food in order to get to their next space. And the bigger the body size, the farther the bee can fly before it needs a little snack, right? Like if we're going on a road trip across the United States, we're not going to drive 10 hours and not eat anything or not stop for gas or anything like that. So we need to encourage these kind of stepping stone habitats to be able to get our bees in between these larger patches of green space, whether they're in agricultural lands or just between park spaces even. And that's really crucial. So don't need to really take much away from the slide other than historically, our bees' flight distances have been categorized as like 12 millimeters and larger can fly this far, and then the smaller than that can fly this far. But I created an example for Houston, Texas, their bees, and what I would do with their body size categories. And so the smaller the bee, the less far they can fly before they need more food. So some of them can only fly like 3-4 blocks before they need a little snacko. And so looking at an example downtown, and I'll do a comparison one too, saying like, what if we just retrofitted some plants in our park spaces? Like, would that be enough introducing biodiversity in the spaces to accommodate an increased percentage of native bee species? And for our large native bees, it's likely possible. Houston, fun fact, has about 19% of its land use dedicated to surface parking lots alone. while that is a kind of a gross statistic, there's also another statistic that was probably produced about 8 years ago at this point, but it was that 85% of cities have at least 10% of their land use dedicated to some type of parking, which is a lot. And so even though our large native bee species could get between the park spaces, if we go one body size category down, we're already looking at gaps of a couple blocks. And that could be the difference, the make it or break it difference with some of these species. And so these lovely maroon boxes are the parking lots outlined, and like just so many. There's just so many of them, and they're also in multiple different downtowns and in different scenarios. So the idea behind parking lots too is that they are a more equitably distributed land use across a city. And so if a city already has parking lot requirements for plants for screening, as well as things like multifamily, right? Like if there's plants that for green space, or if there's a stormwater management plan, right, for more than 5,000 square feet of disturbance, we can look at how we can require some levels of biodiversity in our different landscapes, because that edge effect does matter and it makes a big difference. So, using this, our large native bees could, get across an urban landscape, even the small. And if we choose the plant species correctly, we can even look at extra small native bee species as well, which are typically the more specialist ones. And so I was in Denver before I moved here. And so how does that compare to Houston, Texas? Well, pretty darn close. A lot of downtowns look pretty similar. And there are way more parking lots and structures than we can even conceptualize when driving across them. And as a side fun fact, tend to think of Denver, at least I would think of Denver as a greener city, but only 6 to 9% of the land use is actually green space there. And Houston actually has up to 12%. So it is a really important initiative to look at those interstitial spaces. And so just kind of like a before and an after. I'm not going to dwell on this here for time reasons, but there are a couple of big things here that we need to kind of consider when we're recommending plants for different situations, such as parking lots. And then also looking at other transportation corridors, because this is all about equitable access and inclusion. We already have plants here. It's just choosing different plants where we're already planting plants, and even on balconies as well. And so if we look at any type of green roof legislation in the future, it is important to not just consider the horizontal strata of a city, but also the vertical strata. So green roofs that are kind of 3 stories and less are really well suited for native bees and for bees in general. But if we go above that, they can't easily see or smell that food. And so that's better for honeybees. And they're often on rooftops. And then above 6 stories is really particular for avian species. And so we can look at how we could recommend different plant pellets for horizontal versus vertical strata in a city too. And it's really important that we select our plants really carefully. And so just some fun pictures, some before and after, right? Like all of these lots that we have done are all lawn and like one shrub, often spireas that are the hedgerow shrub of choice oftentimes. So we change them up. And these photos are in year 2 of these landscapes. And we wanted to make sure that we heavily mulched edges to kind of suppress some weeds, but we barely mulched the interiors to allow for the ground nesters to live there. And we had plenty of them. And then again, spireas, bunch of lawn. This was year 1 when we did the planting. And these were all done by student groups. So we did design build studios. And then this was year 2, like stupid gorgeous, but pardon my French. And just as some proof of concept as well, without showing you the boring logs, we did attract a really good diversity of species and even got a threatened Bombus occidentalis queen to show up to our sites as well to say, if you build it, they really will come. So there's other considerations and everything here. I'm going to skip over those for time's sake. So sorry, I'm probably going to go like 2 minutes over, just because running out of time. But I want to make sure I leave y'all with ideas and potential call to actions for different legislative ideas, or when the Office of Sustainability is really looking at any landscape manual updates. So looking at parking lot screening options, there's already requirements for that, which is amazing. So what we should consider is, do we have recommended plant lists, and do we want to create our own? Is there a collaboration opportunity for that? But even beyond that is, how can we kind of institute some biodiverse principles into these different requirements, such as with parking lots? So we could require, if it's one street frontage, it could require 3 plants that are in bloom in different months. 2 frontages, could require 6 or 7. Could also look at a variety of categories for, planting like 1 grass, 1 shrub, 1 low perennial that bloom in different months. We have a bunch of different options here that are low lifts on us and don't cost any money from our end either, which is huge. Oop. And also considering 2 other things that are in place, like the Urban Meadows Study and Report. It is important, like having in the lower right-hand corner these large swaths. Like I know BCRP and Forestry have a proposal for a large urban meadow in one of their parks, and that's amazing. But they're also really effective in strips. So do we have other options like vacant lots and different utility easements that are larger? Could we be doing that there? And is that a more maintenance cost saving as well? And then considering, green roof legislation, looking at types of plants and number of plants for the different stories that would be instituted for any green roof legislation is really important too. And, could we be running some pilot test cases on vacant land where we're also solving some problems and instituting some effective soil stabilization plants? So like if there's a vacant lot that has small trash and rodents as a problem, could we remove the lawn, add into topsoil and seed mint, peppermint, and lavender on these lots to actually deter rodents? And that's what I have for you today.
Can I
That was
just say
the
something?
fastest I've ever done it. So
I really really like what you said. I think so. My daughter is going to University of Maryland to get her master's in resource management. Her focus is more on marine life, but all throughout her childhood, she did a lot of independent learning around conservation and teaching young people. She was one of the Henry Hall students at the Baltimore Aquarium, who was part of the aquarium's urban habitats work with students in schools. And one of the things, I went to a class with her some years ago at the Science Center that talked about bees and shared information about the close relationship between humans and bees. And I think one of the things that they said was like, if bees became extinct within 2 years, the human life would begin to like disappear. We're that closely related to bees because they pollinate and help to produce the food that we eat. And so because of that, I am very intentional in my home garden to make sure that I plant vegetables and plants that attract bees. So I really love your presentation. And there's so much that we can do in terms of educating our community and also making sure that there's policy that sustains the quality of human life by educating people about the small things they can do to really create safe spaces where human beings and bees can cohabitate together. Because I think most people don't, they see things as a pest, but they don't realize that we're all connected and and bees play a very important role in our survival as human beings.
Very
Thank
much.
you
And
so
a lot
much.
of the bees look like flies when they're flying around. And the best way to tell the difference is if it looks like it's a little intoxicated when it's flying, it's probably a fly. If it's flying very intentionally, it's probably a native bee.
Oh, wonderful. Have we done any work with a lot of our with many of our schools? I know in Baltimore we have the new school constructions that are still going on. Have we worked with any of those schools around green roofing and gardening with the purpose of using that space also as outdoor classroom to teach young people these things, but also creating spaces where bees can habitate and really pollinate the plants that they need?
Definitely a sustainability question. And since we're out of time, I'll just say that at least in my position, every parking day, we are running different big events with the schools. And my first one that I ran this past year, it was with 3 schools, and I did get native plants donated for their outdoor classroom spaces. And we showed the kids how to plant the plants, invited the council members out as well. And so there are some things that are being done.
Thanks for the questions, Katrina and Danielle too. I just wanted to let everybody know we're at time. If folks want to stick around and ask more questions afterwards as possible, but I wanted to respect the meeting time, let everybody know that unless Mia or Ava, you have anything, I guess we're officially over. Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. If we want to still ask questions, I just wanted to respect everybody's time who was sticking around for the commission, but great conversation though.